a recording of this presentation also after we're done. So welcome. Good morning. Again, Jen with Complete Payroll and Emily with Ally HR Partners. So we will get started. Start screen sharing. All right. You can see that, Jen?
I cannot.
The presentation? It should be screen sharing.
I can't. I only see you and I right now.
All right. Let me just make sure everything is good there. Stop sharing. All right, here we go. We should just be to the side, Jen, and then the presentation is going to be in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little bit. All right, start sharing. I know it's because of I was trying to share one window and said there might be some technical difficulties. So, do you see now?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. It's not a webinar or Zoom meeting without some technical difficulties.
Right.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining. Jen and I this morning, again, Jen and I partnered up to come to you and provide you with some information here that we think everyone's probably universally struggling with or grappling with on top of everything else right now and their personal lives and business world due to COVID. So hopefully you can walk away from this presentation with some helpful information to give you some more peace of mind, as we finish out this year and head into 2021. So the main topic of the presentation is really 5 things all employers need to know for 2021. Really, it's evolved into, again, a lot more than 5 things really when you start digging into it, and also things that not only you need to know for 2021, but need to prepare for as we finish out 2020. So we'll get into all those details. So again, my name is Emily Martin. I own a company called Ally HR Partners. We provide HR services to small and medium-sized businesses in Western New York. What that means is really being an advisor and a coach for your business who may already have an existing HR person on staff, but who's really overburdened and can't really look at the strategic and value-add stuff. And more kind of risk mitigation-based compliance stuff, or you're a business owner or an office manager or someone who's wearing multiple hats. You don't have assigned HR, which means you don't have assigned HR expertise, and we help partner with you to really inject that into your business. So that's what we're set up to do. So our information is here. I'll share this again at the end of the presentation, but you can always find more information there. We work with businesses across Western New York, all different industries, restaurants, medical practices, you name it. We've worked with that business, and really these concepts in HR applies to all of them pretty universally. And you can rest assured that we have the experience to help you out. All right, so like I said, we try to break this presentation down into the 5 most important things that you should know. They're listed here, but we're going to talk about the minimum wage updates. We're all pretty familiar with these at this point. They've been happening year over year for a while. That includes hourly and salaried minimums. COVID leaves are ending. COVID's going to be in this presentation a couple times, but the federal COVID leaves from the CARES Act are set to end at the end of this year on December 31st. As of right now, it doesn't seem they're going to be extended. Who knows? We'll see, but some planning for that. New York State paid family leave is changing. This is kind of going under the radar because everything else, but paid family leave is something that you've probably been providing to your employees for the last few years since it went into effect. That is increasing in amount and eligibility. So you need to know about that. Paid sick leave, another type of leave in addition to all the COVID stuff. It's basically paid sick time off that everyone has to offer. That's a huge change for employers coming into 2021. And then just more notes on COVID, other things to plan for. It's not going away. As we know, it's probably going to get worse again before it gets better. We're pretty much already moving towards a red zone. So we'll talk about that as well. And then some other bonus items. All right, so the first, this is probably the simplest thing we're going to talk about today is minimum wage updating. Unfortunately, most things in HR are not black and white. This pretty much is. So again, this increase is part of a scheduled for New York State increases that has been kind of going on for quite a few years now. It's the final scheduled increase after December 31st of this year. There are no more scheduled increases, but it's still minimum wage is supposed to keep increasing. So we'll see what happens next year. But basically right now, minimum wage is $11.80 per hour. So if you're paying an employee hourly and it's not hospitality, right? No tips, you should be paying them $11.80 right now. If you're not, let's talk, because we probably need to look at fixing some problems there. It's going up to $12.50. So again, by December 31st on that day, you need to increase everyone to $12.50 per hour. If you are an industry where you are allowing for the tip credit, so that should just be hospitality at this point, food service, hotels and things, it's going from $7.85 to $8.35. Obviously the tip credit is increasing as a result of that. And then if you own a franchise perhaps and are subject to the fast food regulations, it's going from $13.75 to $14.50. And then that goes up again on July 1st if you're in fast food to $15, and that's where it's going to stay. You qualify for fast food if you're a franchise in nationally your business. For example, if you own a small group of Tim Hortons, right? Tim Hortons, there are certainly more than 30 locations nationwide. So if you're in that boat with 30 or more locations, you're subject to the fast food minimum wage. So in addition to the hourly minimum wage going up, salary minimum wage is also increasing. So, I think probably most people here understand that there's basically two classifications of employees. There's non-exempt or hourly, and then exempt or salaried. So if you have employees who are salaried or exempt, meaning they're exempt from having to receive overtime pay, there is a minimum associated with that as well. So if you didn't know that, let's talk again, because we want to make sure we take a look and go back and, mitigate the exposure you have if you haven't been doing this up to this point. But in 2020, the minimum was $46,000 about, and now it's going up to about $49,000, $48,750 as of December 31st. So if you have an employee that you're paying salaried, chances are they're going to fall into either the administrative or the executive exemption categories. That's where most salary employees fall, especially if they're managers, and you need to increase their salary to this new amount as of December 31st. Or if that's a huge increase, you might want to consider having them go hourly, and we can, walk you through kind of weighing the pros and cons of that also. Understand if they don't fall into those administrative or executive categories, for example, if they're professional qualifying, like an IT worker or something like that, the threshold is much lower, still regulated by the federal government instead of New York State, and that is a little over $35,000 a year. So again, a little bit complicated, and if you have questions, we can certainly answer those after this or in a separate meeting. And teachers are exempt from this as well, or other specific practitioners of law or medicine or specific professions. So, a quick wage and hour lesson, as I kind of alluded to, minimum wage can be different based on your exemption status, salaried or hourly, based on where you're operating in New York State or in the country. Certainly they vary from state to state. Or individual position, right? I talked about the executive exemption versus the administrative exemption versus the professional. So those are all things we're prepared to help walk you through if you're uncertain. Salaried positions must meet the minimum salary requirement, but they also have to meet some duties requirements as defined by those exemption categories. So for example, to meet the executive exemption category, you have to pay someone now that $48,750, and you have to make sure the job qualifies for that. So usually for the exemption category, it means that they have employees reporting to them, they're making hiring and firing decisions, that kind of thing. So again, those are pretty heavily, audited and litigated areas of employment law. So if you're unsure if your employees are being paid properly or classified properly, let's talk, because we, don't want you to get in trouble there. Hourly or non-exempt staff must be paid overtime for hours over 40. That's something that most of us know, but just make sure if you're paying someone hourly, you're tracking their hours so you can pay them overtime if you need to. And then if you're paying employees at the tip to minimum wage, make sure, one, that you're allowed to based on their position. So at this point, that means basically restaurants and, other hospitality industries. And then also make sure that between what you're paying them hourly and what they get for tips each week, it's equaling that minimum wage. So if you don't have that set up in payroll now, we can talk with Jen and your payroll rep at Complete Payroll to talk about making sure that's in place. But you want to make sure that's happening so that you're not violating minimum wage law. And then there are a lot of special rules for overtime and call-in pay and different pay rules for New York State. So again, if you're uncertain and you just want to make sure you're doing all that right, let's talk. We can do a whole wage and hour audit or review with you to make sure that you're good. Wage and hour compliance and claims are the #1 litigated issue in New York State, and it just takes one disgruntled employee to kind of blow you in or make a claim, and then all of a sudden you have to open up your books and the whole practice. So it's definitely an area you want to make sure that you're good in. So that's just a quick wage and hour lesson, and certainly we'd be happy to work with you to make sure you're good there later. So those are the wage and hour updates for minimum wage. Again, if you still have questions, just a quick mention, and we'll talk about this again later. We are always developing free content, including like checklists for wage and hour compliance and things, and sending them out to our subscribers. So check out our website, Ally HR Partners. This little box will pop up and you can put in your email address to sign up for all of our free newsletters and checklists and things, including updates when we're having webinars like this as well, which should be helpful to you. All right, so #1 was minimum wage. #2, COVID leaves are set to end at the end of the year. So, the special COVID leave that New York State put in place and the federal government with the CARES Act and the extensions of the FMLA for, getting tested or being sick or for childcare, those are all set to expire on December 31st. Obviously, our need for these isn't going to go away December 31st, but I highly doubt that our federal government will be cooperative enough to work together to pass an extension before that date. So at least for a period of time, I do think that this will end then. So that being said, there's a lot of things you want to consider. Make sure all your record keeping for these things is complete. So if you have employees who have used the federal COVID leave or been paid out for the federal COVID leave for childcare or getting tested or being sick and in quarantine, make sure that in the payroll system, obviously if you paid that out, I'm sure it's coded that way, but we can check with Complete Payroll to make sure that's the case. But you also want to make sure you've tracked these hours, because if the leave is extended again, you don't want to over provide the leave, right? So you're required to provide 12 weeks of these extended FMLAs. That actually feeds into an employee's eligibility to use FMLA for other non-COVID reasons. So, from a payroll tax credit audit standpoint, you want to make sure these records are kept, but, if you need to, defend your receiving this tax credit later. But you also want to make sure from an HR standpoint with future leave eligibility that you've tracked all of this time for each employee. So definitely look into that. And again, it's something that we can help you with. Also, you want to make sure you have affirmation documents, which we do have available through our website and our COVID library. But if someone used COVID leave because they, had to quarantine or were tested positive or were exposed or had to take care of a child that lost childcare, you need to have the employee fill out a document that says, that affirms them stating they lost childcare or had to quarantine, and have that in their employee file. Again, if you're ever audited and need to substantiate, you as a company receiving a tax credit for that person, you would need to provide that. So again, it's available through our website and our COVID library. So please go there if you have questions. And then a side note, even though the COVID leaves are set to end, and we'll talk about this again at the end of the presentation, but people's need for this isn't going away. And if it's childcare need, if your only other option is to let the employee go, if you don't want to let them work from home or they can't, you might want to consider doing something else and just granting leaves of absence after this, because certainly the brain drain that could happen there, if you have a good employee otherwise, is probably not worth, giving them a short leave of absence for a little bit longer. So you want to consider that. But also you want to consider the ADA obligations. That's Americans with Disabilities Act. If you have an employee who doesn't want to come to work because they don't want to be exposed because of their asthma, you probably are obligated to provide them with a leave of absence, a job protected leave of absence, because their asthma is a disability condition. And so even if they don't qualify for FMLA anymore, you want to make sure that you're considering all of those things. So again, not black and white, pretty gray, like a lot of HR stuff. And if you have these scenarios, we encourage you to run them by us to make sure you're not putting yourself at risk later. So that's going away. But again, like we said, COVID leaves are still here for now. So that's kind of all the record keeping you should do before the end of the year when they end. But make sure that you understand right now, as we go back into kind of a state of a shutdown between now and the end of the year, what obligations you're required to, what obligations you have to provide this leave to your employees. So again, all this information is broken down and provided on our website in pretty easy, comprehensible guides. So if you have employees, again, that have to get tested, they have to quarantine, they're traveling, childcare, if you check out our resources there, it'll walk you through what you need to provide them and how you need to do it. And again, the website is listed and highlighted there. All right. So number 3, New York State paid family leave is increasing. So this is a pretty easy one. So again, if you guys don't remember, because we've been living in a COVID world with COVID leaves, New York State paid family leave is basically New York State's personal, FMLA. So paid family leave can be used for if you need to care for a loved one because they're sick, or a loved one because of military purposes, or for bonding. Most often it's used for bonding with a newborn, for mothers and fathers after you have a child. So this still will remain this year, in addition to any COVID extensions. Right now, people get 10 weeks at 60% of their weekly pay. It's going up to 12 weeks at 67% of pay for 2021. Again, this is all managed through the same carrier in New York State as disability, so you don't have to worry about paying it out or anything, but just know that now your employees will be eligible for 12 weeks of this leave. And it can be taken in day increments or week increments, basically whatever the employee chooses. Side note, if you're an employer who is required to provide FMLA, so you have 50 or more employees, this now will run 12 weeks just like FMLA, so you might want to consider putting in a policy that requires the use of FMLA with the use of paid family leave, so that an employee doesn't use 12 weeks of paid family leave and then also is eligible then for 12 more weeks of FMLA. Even though it's unpaid, that's still a lot of time for an employee to be out of work for you that you have to require, so that's something we would recommend. And again, we're happy to review all of your leave policies for, best practice items like that if you aren't sure what to do. So pretty easy one there. Paid family leave is increasing. This is the last increase for paid family leave, up to 12 weeks at 67% of pay. All right. Number 4, New York State paid sick leave goes into effect. So another thing with paid and sick and leave. But paid sick leave is totally separate from anything to do with, paid family leave, or really designated, big chunks of time off or leave because of medical conditions or childcare or anything like that. So basically what New York State paid sick leave is paid time off for sick days. It's basically now New York State is requiring that all employers provide paid sick days or paid time off to employees for qualifying reasons. So this goes into effect January 1st. If you are doing an earning basis, you have to start January 1st with whatever the employees would have earned back to September 30th. Again, something we can help walk you through. But basically, if all employers, unless you really are below a certain revenue and a certain employee count standpoint, under 4, have to provide 40 to 56 hours. So if you have over 100 employees, it's 56 hours, and then under 100 is 40 hours. of paid sick time per year for all of your employees. So that means part-time, per diem, seasonal, everyone. You need to provide this time off to, which is definitely different than other rules in the past. The qualifying reasons for paid sick leave are listed here. Basically, it's anytime an employee or their immediate loved one is sick and they need to either seek a diagnosis or just kind of deal with the, symptoms, or seek treatment. It also includes absences for the family member or for a family member or the employee themselves for domestic violence situations, sexual offenses, human trafficking, which includes court dates and things like that. So these are the real reasons for the paid sick leave. Nothing stops an employee from calling in and lying and saying that they're sick when really they're going to the beach. But there's certain ways we can construct a policy for you that meets the requirements of this law. But that protects you as a company and gives you some teeth to be able to enforce this. So this is a huge major change, guys. If you are an employer and you don't have a plan for this yet, I highly recommend you reach out. There's a lot of best practices that we can help you put in place. We've done this with dozens of businesses. Some of them offered time off before, some of them didn't. And so in order to reduce the financial impact to you and offering this paid time off, to all of your staff, we highly recommend you reach out because there are some ways kind of around it, I would say.
Emily, we do have a question if you want to answer that real quick.
Sure. I can't see that screen, so if you want to read it out, that'd be great.
Sure. We currently use sick time to cover tardies, like I overslept. Can the new PSL be used for these tardies?
Sure. Yeah, so what I would recommend is modifying, you probably would have to modify your attendance policy anyway to comply with New York State paid sick leave to say that whenever someone is using this time, you're not going to count those absences against them from a disciplinary action standpoint. So that's just a tip also. But I would recommend modifying your attendance policy and your time off policies to say whether an absence is planned or unplanned down to a certain amount of time, right? So 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, a half day, full day. We will require you to use any time off you have earned, sick time first and then vacation or something like that. But that should be fine as long as it's uniform and consistent. And, I would just make sure you're tracking that. So that's a really good question. And it's a good point because this law really requires employers to examine their policies, not just their paid time off policies, but attendance too, because again, you won't really be able to discipline anymore for attendance in a lot of ways, unfortunately, as a result of this. Some other notes here. Employees must accrue this time on all hours worked. So if you're not going to go to a dump of the paid sick time at the beginning of the year and you want to make employees earn it each pay period or whatever, it does have to be earned on all hours worked. So if an employee suddenly works 60 hours in 1 week, they should be earning more paid sick time that week towards their total 40-hour eligibility for the year, and accounting for those additional hours, because the rule is they have to earn 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked. And again, that's something that is an administrative nightmare, and we certainly can talk with your rep from Complete Payroll, talk about how you can program these rules into your payroll system now, or maybe you want to upgrade to like a time and attendance tracking ability to make all of this easier for you going into next year. So again, something we definitely are happy to work with you on. Another thing I do want to mention that's listed here is you want to consider combining this with current time off policies. So most people freaked out immediately when they saw this law because they thought, oh my God, I'm already offering everyone 80 hours vacation. Now I have to offer them another 40 or 56 hours of sick time. And that's not true. I want to make that super clear. That's not true. That's not what you need to do. We really recommend taking a look at that vacation policy and turning it into a PTO or generic paid time off policy, and then writing in a couple things that make that policy compliant with this New York State paid sick leave, including stating that they can use this time off for sick time. And then basically your PTO time or the vacation time from the past is now also acting as paid sick time for the future. So it allows you to meet the requirements of this law without having to provide additional time off and that additional financial burden. So again, every client I've worked with, pretty much, we've developed a different kind of policy or set of policies to comply with this. You know, maybe you were offering full-time people time off before that you combined and not part-time. So then part-time people just get sick time and full-time people get PTO. Like, there's all sorts of creative solutions that we can do to minimize the impact to your business. So again, I encourage you to reach out if you don't have a plan yet, or you do have a plan, but now think perhaps we can help you put together a better plan that is best for your business. We do have, this covered a lot of information here today on paid sick leave, but there really is honestly a lot more to consider. So again, you can reach out, but we also on our website have a whole recorded webinar on this topic where we go really in depth. So I would encourage you to go to our website, allyhrpartners.com/resources, and you can watch that webinar there. It should answer a lot of your questions. And then of course, you can always follow up with reaching out with questions to us as well. So again, really, really complicated subject, but definitely a huge change. I'd say the biggest change for employers for next year, and the biggest change in a while for employers outside of coronavirus. All right, let's see a sip of water here. Number 5, COVID isn't going away. So we already talked about this a little bit and planning for the continued need for leave, the continued disruption of this to your operation. But if you haven't planned for this stuff now, or maybe you closed down in the beginning of this and are now going to try to stay open and weather the storm through this winter, these are just things that you want to consider if you have not already. Again, there are more resources on our website that go in more in depth into these things, and we can help you develop some of them, but things to get just planted in your mind and have discussions maybe with some people this week on. Remote work policies. You know, if you have a business where at least some of your employees could continue working but work remote or from home, either again, because now they have to be home with their kids, and you do this in lieu of just letting them go on the COVID leave, or they can't be in the workplace, you want to consider developing a remote work policy. You know, a lot of people don't understand there are risks to people working remote, like loss of productivity, people sack off, obviously, but also, you know, you're liable for the workers' comp claim if they get hurt while working from home. You're still responsible for making sure they keep all of your company and client and, you know, patient or whatever your business is doing information confidential if they're working from home. So we recommend, and we have policies that we can, you know, help you customize, putting together a really clear set of expectations for when people should be working, where they should be working, having a secure workspace, that kind of thing, before you let people work from home, because otherwise it's just, the cat's going to get out of the bag and you're going to have to try to get it back in if things start to go awry. We've seen lots of clients that have had employees kind of start abusing the freedoms of this, and, you know, whenever they try to get a hold of them, they're kind of away doing stuff with their kid. And so being strategic about scheduling their time and having them block out time to help their kids learn or whatever is really, can help you avoid a lot of headaches in the future. Consider schedule flexibility on top of that. So maybe in lieu of remote working, maybe someone can come into the office, you know, at different times than usual to avoid the crossover for exposure reasons for COVID. But, you know, again, these are all options in lieu of having to let someone go out on the required COVID leave and having to pay them for that time. It really will benefit your business to do that. If, you know, things get dark this winter, you need to lay off staff again, I just want to let you know that there are other options to layoffs. New York State has a shared work program where you have to apply for it in advance, but it's a pretty easy application process. And basically, you reduce all of your employees' hours by a certain amount, and you pay them for the time they work, and New York State pays them for the difference in the time they're not working. This is a great program. Not a lot of people know about it. It's actually available all the time, not even when, you know, there's COVID. So if you have seasonality to your business, you can always use this. But again, I would recommend looking into that. There's links on our website and other articles to that information. Erie County also has a grant program. If you haven't heard about it, that's providing funding. PPP is going to continue to be extended and updated, I'm sure. So, consider all of those routes and getting funding to pay your employees before just laying off. Obviously, safety measures, if you haven't put these in place already, I guess good for you because you must not have many problems, but I don't know many clients that don't have COVID problems right now. But just make sure you're doing things that protect your business later and also obviously protect you and your employees. So you should have a daily questionnaire in place right now. So before anyone comes into your office or your restaurant or whatever it is, you should be making sure every single day before they come to work that they're completing a questionnaire that says they haven't been exposed, they don't have symptoms, they have not traveled, and they haven't tested positive. And we can help you put together a super easy solution for that. And I believe there's options to actually build that into the time and attendance software as well before they clock in, but you should be doing that. Obviously wearing masks, encouraging healthy hand washing habits. You could host a flu shot clinic just to, check one of the, viruses off your list. So different things like that. And you just want to make a plan to deal with all of these things and be proactive about it, because otherwise you're going to always be responding and you're always going to be behind the 8 ball. And, we have lots of resources to do that on our website. All right, so those are the main 5 things. Just some other things to kind of get your mind or your juices going here as we go into the next year. Obviously, as we know, especially with the new administration going into place from a presidency standpoint, diversity and inclusion and equity are all going to be themes that we see employees demanding to be more present in the workplace, but also from a legal standpoint. New York State has been good about this even throughout Trump's administration, but federally, we certainly will see more litigation and regulations about these. So make sure that you have policies and practices in place, even if they're informal, that address these items from an employee engagement standpoint, but also a legal protection standpoint. Legal trends, it kind of goes along with that. I'm sure we already in New York are seeing a huge increase in claims about disability discrimination with people not granting COVID leaves. Discrimination in other areas is on the rise just because of the political climate. So whenever you're making decisions about employees, whether it's layoff decisions or who to let work from home and who not to let work from home, or really anything, make sure that you have sound evidence to back up your decision and that it's kind of based on a set of rules and principles that you decided ahead of time and that it's not individual based, which then leaves the door open to a discrimination claim. And unfortunately, unless you can defend a claim and prove that you aren't discriminating, you're probably going to be found to be discriminating and you're going to lose that lawsuit. So a little bit of planning and an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And, that's kind of what we help businesses do, is set up those principles and rules and policies and practices and training managers ahead of time to avoid these problems in the future. It saves a lot of time and money, but also it just creates a better, healthier, more productive workplace. And then a system provider interview. So we're going to talk about, this in the rest of this presentation, but are you getting the best benefits from your brokers and things now? Are your service providers really, working for you and providing you a service? But also, are the systems that you're using now, are you using them to the best of their abilities? So whether it's the payroll system, you have a complete payroll, a time and attendance system, an HRIS system, if you have them or don't, what can you do to utilize systems or implement new systems at a pretty low cost to remove a lot of this extra work that comes with tracking these things, whether it's the paid sick leave or the COVID leaves, and making sure that, the record keeping is there so that if you get audited, you can, defend yourself and have those records. And Jen, if you want to chime in here, feel free to, but, one of those options right now, if you're not using it, is the time and attendance platform through Complete Payroll. So if you don't have that as kind of an arm with your payroll system, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because I'm not sure how you're going to track people's, requests or use for the paid sick leave or just time off, where, certainly we're going to see New York State going after companies and doing random audits to make sure people are doing that. So Again, if you're planning to do this in an Excel spreadsheet or something or through email, that sounds like a nightmare to me in the end in order to, prove compliance or track all these things and not give people too much time off or not enough. So this might be something you want to consider. Leave management also, I'm sure you can set up codes within this system to have track people's usage of FMLA or, emergency paid COVID leave or disability or workers' comp or whatever it is they're using. Again, would save you a ton of time later and having to do that in the case where you have an issue with an employee. And then these systems also offer enhanced reporting on these items as well if you need to track usage and things like that. And Jen, I don't know if you have anything to add about this system.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate the way we would put the proper formula in your time and attendance system. And then it would accrue properly. And then we would actually create how we look at it with Emily, we would create different buckets if necessary, or it would be taking out of the proper bucket, if you will. And then again, to reiterate, New York State is going to be looking for this not to be followed. And they're not shy. They're not shy to dig in a little bit. So, just discussing with Emily and making sure that you have a system in place for reporting purposes. I mean, we would be able to pull these reports by snapping our fingers and complying with that audit. And if you are doing it through email or Excel, it would just be an absolute nightmare. So just having the system in place. And another thing on the timekeeping, and you did mention it briefly, is that questionnaire for the COVID questions. We do have that option before employees were to clock in. They simply answer, 5 questions. Have you been feeling sick? Have you been in contact with anybody in 14 days? Whatever the 5 questions are, they answer no, no, no. They clock in. Again, that just helps with compliance and that you're doing your part because a lot of people are working remotely. And even if they're not, it's forcing them to answer these questions every single time they clock in.
Yeah, and it's just like a great gatekeeping. That's awesome that it can do that. And it's a great reminder to the employees every day, like if they're feeling a little bit sick and maybe they don't think about it, it'll help, it'll help plant that seed again in their mind before they walk in the office of, crap, should I really be going in to expose everybody possibly today if I don't feel well? And I had a client where that happened. The person then tested positive and it created a huge disruption in the business because now all those other people that they saw before they went home were potentially exposed and had to quarantine for a period until they got their test results. So, whether it's to defend yourself later or, just to avoid that disruption, the questionnaire certainly is helpful.
Absolutely.
And on that same note, with just the reporting and the tracking and things, there also is, if your business isn't using kind of an HRIS system now or any systems or technology to, hold employee records or have employees kind of self-serve themselves in terms of accessing payroll records or changing, direct deposit information and things like that. The advanced HR system and product does that as well, which is available through Complete Payroll and also is fully integratable into your payroll and your time and attendance. The biggest thing with this is, especially if you're an HR person of one and you're already trying to do everything, or if you're an office manager and owner trying to do everything, the administrative burden of HR, whether it's payroll, benefits, whatever it is so, huge as it is. It's impossible that you're doing a great job on these other things like compliance and everything too. It's a full-time job. So a system like the advanced HR system or the time and attendance system can take some of that burden away from you and not having to, update the employee's direct deposit for them or their taxes or, the benefits portal and having an open enrollment that can be electronic and you not having to help employees walk through the paperwork. So, again, this is a huge, the amount of cost saving and time wise, it could be huge with a system like this. So definitely something you might want to consider and reaching out to Jen about.
Yeah. And to, come full circle when you were talking about the affirmation letter that employees should sign if they are taking time off, if they're in quarantine or they have to take care of children. That is an example of an employee document that will go right into their employee folders on the electronic system. Otherwise, so many people are working remotely. And even if you are, the head of HR working remotely, where are you keeping all these employee forms? All of a sudden they're emailing you, and then you're printing them out and keeping them in your desk drawer, and then things get lost. Again, if we all go back to if you're ever audited, or just if you need to go in the employee folder to answer any questions or to follow up on anything, everything will be in their electronic folder. It just makes things much more simple. And you are, just helping yourself with compliance issues. Electronic onboarding has been just such a huge time saver this past year, where all the employees are filling out all their onboarding forms electronically, and uploading their documents electronically, and their voided checks and things. And they also, you can put your company documents in this as well. So they're signing off on the handbook that is in there. So they're signing off on the handbook with all of your policies in it. Anything that's changing, because there are a lot of, I don't know if you picked up on this, but there are a lot of changes this year, and there will probably be next year. Making sure that once there's a change and Emily can help you write your policy, you upload that into your company policy. All of your employees will receive that, and they have to sign off on that. And it's very easy for you to see who didn't sign off on it, who to follow up with. But they'll be able to do that right electronically. So you're not chasing them to send you emails and things like that. So it's been a huge time saver. It's been a necessity in 2020 with so many working remotely. And just moving forward, it just makes everything a lot more simple, and to just make sure you're in compliance with all of New York State and federal guidelines.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jen.
Sure.
All right. So again, if you still have questions, you can reach out through our website. I would recommend, if you liked the content today, or if you check out our resources on our website at LIHR, to go to our website and just subscribe to our, newsletters, because you'll get notices of, again, webinars like this, or free checklists we send out for these things, or, the affirmation document, whatever it might be. So go ahead and subscribe there. And then, as I mentioned, this is a snapshot of the header of our website. You can find a COVID library on our website, where there is the COVID affirmation document, a step-by-step guide if someone tests positive or is exposed, and what you have to do as an employer with, quarantining and paying them leave. A video recording of our paid sick leave webinars there. So again, if you have more questions about that, it's super comprehensive. I would recommend checking that out. And then our 2021 checklist is there, which captures a lot of the items that we talked about with minimum wage and all the other planning for 2021 that was in this presentation. And we're constantly putting new items and new resources there. So again, subscribe or just keep checking there. And then just a word on, again, what Ally HR Partners does. We basically help your business, comply with all of these things, but not just from a reactive standpoint. We're certainly here in our engaged partnerships when people have one-off things that come up, whether it's an employee claiming discrimination or harassment. But we also really help you kind of plan for these things and plan them strategically. So whether it's doing an audit upfront, putting together a set of policies and a handbook that help you manage your business and help your managers manage, or just kind of really, taking a look at your general practices and approaches, to employee issues and things, and hiring, or, performance management. We, help really just make your business run a lot more smooth, and when it comes to employees, because otherwise employee issues can be a huge time suck. And if you're treating every scenario that comes up as a new scenario and spending time on how you're going to figure it out, to some extent, there's no way to avoid that, but there is a lot of stuff you can do up front to, reduce the cost of the time and the money and responding to that with a lawyer or whatever it might be. So if you think that you have an opportunity in your business to do that better, or save time or add value, we recommend reaching out. we have a number of client referrals that are, references that we can provide and who can really attest to the value we provide. But it really is an underutilized, function of a business and value for a business. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Awesome. I just wanted to bring up one question. Please feel free, if anybody has any questions, we'll save the last 10 minutes or so. If you want to pop a question in the chat, feel free to, and obviously we'll follow up with any questions if you think of anything, over the next few days. But do you see it, Em, or do you want me to read it?
I'm going to get in there right now. Okay, great. All right. We currently use sick time to cover. Okay, we covered that one. If an employee calls off and says they don't feel well, do we automatically pay them the sick pay? And also, if they are scheduled for a 6-hour shift but only accrued 3 hours of sick pay, do we pay them what they have earned if it's not a full shift? Yeah, good question. So, the sick pay by definition is supposed to cover medical conditions, which don't have to be, unlike FMLA or disability or workers' comp, it doesn't have to really be a formal diagnosable medical condition. So a call off for a stomach ache, not feeling well, would be covered by paid sick leave. As long as they have paid sick leave left for the year, you should require them to, use that time. And it would be protected in that case. So I would say you would pay them the 3 hours they've accrued. The other 3 would just be unpaid. And they would reduce that balance down, and it would be a paid sick leave qualifying absence. So hopefully that answered your question, Gary. And again, building up a policy, an attendance policy that works well with your time off policy and in covering all these bases and getting it in your handbook would be key to all of that. The next question, if the county goes red, are you able to have one employee work from the office? We'll have to wait and see what the specific guidance is on that, but I would say that should certainly be possible. It probably will go to a reduced capacity in the workplace again. I don't foresee them, saying no one should be in the office. But I think that would be not an issue at all if one person's going in and doing that stuff. Again, they kind of are making up the rules as we go along with a lot of this stuff, so we'll see.
Right, and a good question is if will it make a difference if they're considered essential or non-essential? Now I know they work for a property management company. I don't know if that would be specific, or would they have a broad answer of one person can go in to do those things?
Yeah.
I
would say more than likely work would be considered essential work if it's making sure bills get paid and things. But also in that situation, one person going in, the risk of that being a problem is so low that, I would say there shouldn't be an issue unless you think the employee is going to push back heavily and then try to make a problem and call and report you to the state or something. But otherwise, I think you're probably in an okay spot there. We have a question too. So if someone personally messaged us, if an employee travels, so like for Thanksgiving, or just, at all during this holiday season and they come back afterward, obviously, as we know, New York State put in place the new travel guidance. Are we required to provide them the paid COVID leave while they're quarantining? So this is something that there's definitely been a lot of mixed messaging on in some ways, because when Governor Cuomo put out the travel quarantine rules, he said that those people are not eligible for the paid sick leave, but that was only New York State's paid sick leave, not the federal. He has no jurisdiction over federal. So unfortunately, if someone voluntarily travels for Thanksgiving or any other time, and they have to quarantine when they come back, you are required to provide the COVID leave if they haven't already exhausted that at another point in the year. So remember, people only get 2 weeks if it's for quarantining or being sick or getting tested. So if they already used that earlier this year, make sure you're not providing that again. I would say, you should still give them the time off unpaid if they have to get tested or quarantined. I wouldn't open up that bag of worms of starting to discipline employees or let them go because of COVID absences. But you do not need to pay that. You can make them use, paid time off or vacation or something like that for that time. So that's a pretty common misconception.
It's confusing.
Yes, and our COVID guides on our website have a lot of that information in them too about the travel quarantine and stuff, because those rules are different now too. All right, any other questions at all? Great. Well, thanks everybody. So we'll get you all on our email list anyway to subscribe and things, and please reach out if you are interested in us doing a review of your plans for the paid sick leave, or want to do an audit of any sort with wage and hour or anything like that. And certainly get in touch with Jen if you are interested in implementing another system.
Yeah. I see one more question that popped up too, Emily.
Yeah, I see that. If an employee works on average 44 hours per week, do they get 88 hours COVID sick pay for the 2 weeks? So yeah, so it's definitely based on what a normal work week would be for them. It's really more about pay than hours. So if they get 44 hours of pay every week on average, they would be entitled to that same amount of pay for the 2 weeks of the COVID leave. So yes, it should be the 44 hours. There is a maximum amount that they can get. I think it's $511 a week. I'd have to just refresh myself on what it is. But if it's over that monetary amount, make sure you don't exceed that. And there's information, there's links to that information on our website, or you can message me after on that. But there is a monetary maximum as well. So I don't know how much that equals from a pay standpoint, but make sure you don't go over that, because you won't get reimbursed beyond the maximum. All right. Great. Well, thanks everybody. If you have other questions come up, you have my information, you have Jen's information, so please reach out and we will get you a recording of this webinar as well.
Yeah, awesome. And if you know of anybody else who would find this kind of information helpful, please let us know and we'll reach out to them. We'll send them the webinar as well. We'll have some follow-ups. I'm sure December we'll have a couple more hiccups.
Yeah.
And going into 2021. So we want to make sure that, we keep you updated. You have a lot on your plate. You guys you're trying to run a business and navigate through this process, and we want to help any way we can and make things easier. So we're here for you. Don't hesitate to reach out for anything.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for the collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Everybody have a great week. Have a great Thanksgiving. If we don't talk
happy
to you,
Thanksgiving.
we're out. And Emily, enjoy your turkey for 2 weeks.
The dog licked turkey, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for attending. We really appreciate it. We know it's a busy week, but we'll hope to talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.